Hi there. So it's been a while since we did a video, and the reason for that is I've been working on getting ASP.NET Core up on AWS EC2 Linux. And there's a lot of different websites and YouTube videos out there on how to do this. Unfortunately, because of the changes in ASP.NET Core over the last couple of years, the way that you do this has changed. And so, as usual with the videos that I do, I try to find the simplest path through to just get you up and running as quickly as possible. So this video will be done in two parts. The first part will be just how to get .NET Core installed on AWS EC2 Linux and getting your connection over to EC2 Linux. So you could certainly install on a Windows machine in AWS. You don't have to use Linux, but because .NET Core is cross-platform, I thought I'd go ahead and tackle that. We'll do some subsequent videos with databases and other things using AWS. AWS is a competitor to Azure and really owns the majority of the market out there in cloud computing, and is a great ecosystem and environment for you to deploy applications into. There's a free tier that I'm going to be using. You can get on the free tier for a year and try out different things. So we'll be using a relatively small machine for this when we configure it. So I mentioned some of this already, but essentially what EC2 is, there's different cloud services with Amazon Web Services or AWS. One of them is virtual machines or EC2 instances, and you'll see when we create the machine that there's lots of different ways to create them. And I mentioned the free tier already. And here's what we're going to be doing then. We're going to create an AWS machine to run on. We're going to connect to that machine using Putty, and Putty is a terminal program that we'll configure so that you can actually get on the machine in AWS and do things at the command line. We'll need that so that we can install .NET Core, which we'll do. And then out of the box, essentially Apache is used up on AWS, but there's other web servers you can use. The built-in Kestrel web server, however, is not going to work to access from the outside. You can access the .NET, any ASP.NET Core web service. You could access that from the machine itself, but if you want to come in from the outside, which we'll do, you've got to get Apache to work with Kestrel, and so we're gonna do that. And we'll then build our ASP.NET Core REST service on Windows. We're going to use our address labels sample that we've been doing. And then we will transfer those files up to Linux using WinSCP, which is another utility that we'll get familiar with. And then we'll just simply run the application in AWS, and we'll test access using Postman. So let's get started. So the first thing we'll do is go to the AWS console. This is similar to the Azure portal that you're familiar with. I already have logged in and created an account, and I'm on the free tier, so you'll need to go ahead and sign up for the free tier or just regular Amazon Web Services, and at that point, you'll be able to log in here, and you'll see down here all the many different things that you can do in Amazon Web Services. And we won't spend a lot of time looking at this, but just be aware that there's a lot of different options. Big internet services, web-based services around the world use Amazon. Amazon's a worldwide global cloud computing environment. Some of the ones that you may be most familiar with are things like Netflix that uses Amazon Web Services. So we'll click on EC2, and we'll actually see that I already have one running host out there, and this is one that I already have set up and running when I was preparing for the video, but we're going to start from scratch and create a new one. So we'll do that. And before we do that, I need one little bit of information, which is my local IP address, and you will figure this out yourself. I need this IP address right here. This is my IP address. It's actually an IP address that changes all the time by my internet service provider, but I'm going to need that a little bit further in the demo, so we'll just make a copy of that. You don't need to worry about that right now. Again, you will need your IP address, and so if you're in an environment where you can't get any kind of a static IP address or an IP address that doesn't change for a while, that could be a challenge for you in doing this. We'll explain more about that in a minute. All right, so we start here by launching an instance. So we just say launch instance, and it gives us a bunch of machine choices here. You can see there's Windows servers down here, and we will possibly look at using some of those. You'll notice all of these are free tier eligible. So the one you want to pick is this one right here, the Amazon Linux 2 LTS candidate. I tried configuring this with this first one, and the OpenSSL stuff is not set up in a way that works exactly right on this machine. And rather than trying to recompile OpenSSL and make that work, I tried this one, and it works fine. It's a newer version of, you'll notice it says it's a newer version of glibc, GCC, and binutils. So anyway, we're going to select that, and you'll notice the little tag here that says it's free tier eligible. So here's all the different types of machines you could get. So you could get really big ones down here, you'll notice. Different network performance that you get on them, different types of memory. We're going to do a real simple little machine. It's got one virtual CPU and 1 gig of memory, and it is free tier eligible, which is why we're picking it. So we'll configure that. Just hit next on that. Take the defaults on the instance details. You don't need to change any of that. Take the defaults on the storage. This is going to have 8 gig of general purpose SSD. Hit next again to add tags. You don't need to worry about those. This is the one you will need to configure is the security group. So SSH is a way for us to get on the machine and actually do things which you'll need to do to configure .NET Core up there. And with the IP address set as zeros here, it's going to allow SSH access from anywhere. Now, when I say that it allows it from anywhere, it still has to go through a user ID and password. But to make this secure, you want to use your IP address. So this is the IP address of the machine that you're going to be coming from to actually manage the EC2 instance. The other thing we need to do is allow HTTP access into the machine. So you can think of this as setting up your firewall, essentially. So for SSH access, we're only going to allow SSH access from this IP address. You'll change this to your IP address, and then you need to make sure that you do allow HTTP access because ASP.NET Core runs on that. And with all that set up, down here you'll see a review of everything that you've selected. You hit launch. And then there's one additional thing here. It wants to have a key pair. And I've got an existing key pair, but I'm going to actually create a new key pair so that you can see how this works. So the key pair is a way to access the instance securely. So I'll just call this EC2 dev test, and I'll say download the key pair, which it's going to download over there, and then I'm going to tell it to go ahead and launch the instance. And while it's launching, we're going to work on this key. Alright, so different services that are out there, again EC2. So if I click into EC2 now, what you'll see is you'll see my one instance that was already running, and you'll notice this other one is coming up. It's being provisioned by Amazon. So they're spinning up a virtual machine out there with the configuration that I selected, which is CentOS Linux, is the version of Linux that it'll be configuring. So it's building that. So while it's doing that, we are going to run Putty. Putty is going to be how we get on the machine. So let's type Putty here. And actually, before we run Putty, we need to run something called PuttyGen. So Putty can't use the format of the key that Amazon generates, this PEM format. And so I'm just going to grab this PEM folder, this PEM file. This is my public-private key. And I'm going to put this over here in our rest folder right here. Oops. So I have that PEM file there. So what the Putty key generator will do was convert this into a public-private key pair that that Putty knows how to use. So you only have to set all this up once. Once you've got this working, you don't need to do it again. But for the first time, you'll need to do this. So we're going to grab this .pem file. So it successfully imported this, and then we're going to say save private key, and we're going to put a passcode on it. Now you'll be prompted. Let's see. Let me put the key passphrase on here. You'll be prompted to type in this passcode when you connect on the box on the EC2 machine. So remember what it is, right? So we'll save this, and we'll call it EC2 test, and it's going to save it as this PPK file. This is also, you can get Putty to work properly. Alright, with that, we're now ready to run Putty. You don't need to do that whole key stuff again, unless you generate a new one. Alright, now what we need to do is we're going to create a session. And the first thing we're going to do is grab our private key for authentication. And it's this EC2 test. So that's the key that we're going to use. And then we're going to fill in the session information here, which will include the IP address of the machine. So we'll need to go and get that. So again, what you're doing is setting up a configuration so that you can actually get on the machine. So let's find the address of our machine. So our machine is now out here running. It's in the US East data center and in the 1C availability zone, US East 1C. So if we look at this, here's the machine that we just created, and here is its public IP address, which we're going to need. So I'm going to copy that, and in Putty we're going to say ec2-user at, and then we will give it our IP address. And then we are going to save this as ec2 test dev. So now we have that configuration, and we're going to go ahead and open that. You get this little warning. Just go ahead and say yes on that. And here's where it wants the passphrase for the private key. Alright, so now I'm up on the machine, and it's the first thing it says here is it says do sudo yum update to apply all updates. So yum is a package manager that you can use on Linux to keep, on CentOS Linux, to keep things current. And so we will go ahead and do an update real quick. And it says, hey, is it okay that I get all this stuff and install it? And we say yes. So we do that first. And then we're going to go through the steps of actually getting .NET Core running on this system. So we now have created the EC2 instance, we've connected to it through Putty, and we have installed updates. So we are now ready to go ahead and install .NET Core and get our application running. And we'll do that in the second video that we'll produce for this. Thanks for watching.